Hello dear friends, we are starting a new session where we will create a new workflow for GitHub Actions. But before we dive into that, let's consider this point. We have our instruction that runs certain commands when we push to the repository. And let's say we have a task to edit the project's source code, commit it, and push it to the server. However, for various reasons, we don't need to trigger this workflow. What should we do? So, we won't be deleting this file or commenting it out. There are several ways that I will demonstrate to you right now. Some are solutions while others are workarounds. You should know about them and use them as needed. Let's say I'm editing my index.html file in my current project directory, and now I want to push these specific changes to the remote repository. I want to commit and push, but as soon as I commit and push, remember that this workflow will immediately trigger in the action. Option number 1, disable this workflow altogether. So I'm selecting this workflow. By clicking on first workflow, as you can very clearly and easily observe, this is indeed my workflow. Please pay very close attention to this important detail. I highlight it, go to settings, and here I select disable workflow. If I disable it, disable workflow, it simply won't execute anything. Now I've turned it off. Notice I have a note here that workflow is disabled. If I commit these changes and push, then come back here to Actions and refresh. Nothing will trigger because my current workflow, specifically this first workflow, is disabled. Alright, that's one solution, but sometimes you just need to commit some changes without needing the workflow to run. You don't want to go in here and manually disable it. There's a solution for that too. So, I'll turn my workflow back on. Now it's active again, and it will trigger when I push to this repository. What should we do next? Let's edit our document again and push. Here's the rule. For GitHub Actions to understand and not trigger the workflow at all. To ignore all workflows in the GitHub Workflows folder, we can add a special text in the commit message right here that will indicate that, for example, we write changes first, our comment related to the commit, and then in square brackets, we need to write action skip. In a literal translation, it means to skip actions. Either skip action or action skip, it doesn't matter. You can write it either way. I'm pushing again. These changes are being made, and right now, nothing will happen as expected. So I refresh this a few more times and still nothing happens. The workflow doesn't trigger as it should. If I edit it again and just commit and push it, the same issue persists. This is quite puzzling and requires further investigation to understand why the workflow is not activating. I need to observe the results carefully to see if there are any changes or updates which might indicate a problem with the system and requires a thorough examination to identify the root cause. Without any comments, this time it will trigger the workflow. Let's check that. Here it is. Our workflow has started. We can stop it right here, or we can wait for it to finish. That's it. The workflow has been successfully completed. Alright, and one more thing that might be applicable here is to just remove the push. And instead, we can use, for example, manual trigger when we click a button. So, let's enable this. We're using workflow dispatch. Notice that I'm writing workflow dispatch without square brackets. Actually, I can write it square brackets too, just like push without square brackets. Square brackets mean an array, and by the term array, we mean that we can pass multiple events. These different events. For this reason, I initially had square brackets, but when we have just one event, we can skip that. Everything is great. Let's go ahead and commit and push these changes one more time. Let's commit and push these changes one more time. We're back on GitHub and we're going to the Actions tab. You can see that nothing is running right now, which means I currently have it set to manual trigger. When I enter this workflow, you can see the Run Workflow button appeared here, and only now can I click it. I select the branch, in my case it's main, and I hit the green button. And now, my workflow has started. That's it. It completed successfully too. Let's bring our piece back to how it was originally. With one exception, we won't be writing square brackets here. I'll comment on one more thing. We have the GitHub Action extension. He helped us in compiling this file. Even when we were pointing, he showed us different things from the documentation. The information is really useful and helps when writing these instructions, but we can also do other things. In this course, we'll encounter various aspects. For example, we currently have some workflows that have run, and we can see all of them here. Here's our latest workflow. Notice that we even have logs. The only thing is, we can't view the logs directly here. There's a link to the logs themselves, and that's how we open them. But let's agree, it's quite convenient. We see the green status, meaning it was successful. So keep in mind that this information is displayed here. Later on, we'll deal with this more. It allows us to create and view secrets, as well as create and edit variables. We'll get into that later. And at this point, we're ready to create our second workflow. In this second workflow, we'll be doing something specific. And at this point, we're ready to create our second workflow. In this second workflow, we're going to do something like this. Remember when we had the diagram in the theoretical part? We had two runners. And I mentioned that runners can work both in parallel and sequentially, provided that a specific previous runner has successfully completed its task. So now we're going to do just that. So let's carefully copy this piece of code, navigate to the GitHub workflow directory, and within this folder, we will proceed to create a brand new file. For clarity and organization, I'll choose to name this file secondworkflow.yaml, ensuring it aligns with our project naming conventions. And I'll paste this code here, so I'll give it a name, and my name will be second workflow. I'll set it to run these instructions on push. The syntax is really simple, guys. For the runners, we created jobs. And each job essentially is a runner. So in the diagram, the square I drew for the runner is actually the job. If I want to run the runners in parallel, I'll write a new job aligned with this job, with 2 spaces in between. So my first job will be called run first parallel command, meaning it will run a parallel command. We need to specify what it runs on. So let's use a different system here. For example, the latest version of Windows. Now, let's move on, step by step. Let's basically keep it simple. We'll just simply have one command everywhere, for example, display node version. This is exactly what it looks like, as you can see. As you can see, Node is successfully installed on all of the systems. And this particular command should indeed return the specific Node.js version for each and every job. So I'm copying this step right here. I think that all this messing around with spaces of mine will be executed anyway. You can install an additional extension that will keep an eye on this, so that there are spaces instead of tabs. That's it. This way I now have 2 jobs that will run in parallel. But that's not all. Let me create another job that will only run after, for example, this first command is completed. I'm setting up another job just to clarify, a third job specifically, and I'll call it run second command in this context, as you might expect. So it's going to use it as the operating system. So what we used in Ubuntu, Windows, let's go with macOS. Now, as you can see, it doesn't really differ from the parallel job, right? Basically, it will also run in parallel with the current setup. But to make it dependent, meaning sequential, because dependency means that the previous one it relies on has to be completed, I need to specify the needs parameter. And in this needs, I need to specify the ID of the job that I'm interested in. As I said, I want to run second command only when run first command has been completed. So I can pass the ID and I can, as an array, if I have several, if I want this job to run, not just after run first command, but after both, to wait until both are completed. Well, in my case, I definitely want this run second command to run only when this run first command has been successfully and completely completed. Alright, and after that, I just need to add a few more specific and detailed steps. Great. Now our second workflow in our project is created. Let's also disable the first workflow in GitHub Actions so that it doesn't run every time we push changes. So we go into the actions in the settings of the first workflow, and here we disable it and make sure to confirm the changes are saved properly before proceeding to the next step. Awesome. Now let's push the changes. Let's go to the actions. As we can see, it's starting up. Let's go into it. And guys, what do we see? So we see run first command. At the same time, those little yellow icons are starting up. Both are working. And run second command isn't working because it's waiting. It just started now. It's waiting for run first command to complete. Run parallel. These two both ran in parallel. Well, while I'm stuttering, all three have already completed. So let's go into each one and see what node it is. So here it's 18182, in parallel it's 18182. And here it's 1818. Basically the same version is installed in all three different systems. But what we were more interested in here was the approach, how we can use jobs and how they interact both in parallel and sequentially. Also, in this lesson, we learned how to disable certain workflows. Basically, that's it for this lesson. See you in the next one, everyone. Take care.